Welcome to Midnight Archives, a place where we drift through forgotten histories, ancient mysteries, quiet conspiracies, and stories buried beneath time itself. Tonight's journey begins in the deserts of ancient Egypt, beneath the shadow of the pyramids, where one of humanity's oldest mysteries still waits patiently beneath the sand. But before we begin, if you enjoy slow, atmospheric stories designed for curious minds and restless nights, please consider subscribing to the archive. And if you'd like, leave a comment below telling us where in the world you're listening from, what time it is there tonight, and which mystery, conspiracy, or forgotten story you'd like us to explore next. There is something strangely comforting about knowing how many people are awake beneath the same dark sky, listening together from different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let the world grow quiet around you. This is Midnight Archives, and tonight we ask a simple question. Who really built the pyramids? The desert remembers differently than we do. Human memory is fragile. Cities disappear. Languages fade. Entire civilizations dissolve quietly into dust. But the desert keeps its silence, and for thousands of years the pyramids have waited there beneath the stars, immovable, watching generation after generation pass before them like drifting sand carried by the wind. Even now, in the middle of the night, while much of the world sleeps, the pyramids remain exactly where they have always been, silent, ancient, patient. And perhaps that is part of what unsettles us about them. Not simply their size, not simply their age, but their stillness. Because the pyramids do not feel abandoned. They feel as though they are waiting for something, or perhaps remembering something. Tonight we travel back more than 4,000 years, to the edge of the Nile River, where one of the greatest civilizations ever known rose slowly from the desert floor. A civilization of priests, astronomers, architects, kings, and stories written in stone. Ancient Egypt, a world shaped by the rhythm of the Nile. Every year the river flooded its banks, covering the land in rich black soil before retreating once more into its winding path through the desert. To the ancient Egyptians, this cycle was sacred. The river brought life, the desert brought death, and between them stood humanity. Briefly, like travelers passing through a dream. And above all things, the Egyptians believed deeply in eternity, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but literally. To them, death was not an ending, it was a transition, a crossing between worlds. And because of this belief, they built monuments unlike anything humanity had ever attempted before. Structures not merely meant to survive lifetimes, but ages. Structures designed to challenge time itself. The pyramids. Even today, modern engineers still debate how these immense structures were truly built. More than 2 million stone blocks, some weighing several tons each, positioned with astonishing precision beneath the burning Egyptian sun, without modern cranes, without engines, without computers, without steel machinery. At least, that is what we are told. And over time, as centuries passed, new theories began to emerge from the shadows. Some believed lost civilizations helped build them. Others whispered about forgotten technologies, hidden chambers, ancient knowledge, or visitors from somewhere beyond the earth itself. Theories dismissed by scholars, revived by storytellers, carried endlessly through books, late-night radio broadcasts, documentaries, internet forums, quiet conversations held long after midnight. But perhaps the real mystery of the pyramids is not whether aliens built them. Perhaps the deeper mystery is why humanity cannot stop returning to them. Why these silent shapes rising from the desert continue to pull at something ancient inside us. Something older than memory. Something difficult to explain. And so tonight, beneath the quiet stars of ancient Egypt, we begin our descent into one of history's oldest mysteries. Long before modern cities, before nations, before clocks, before electric light, there was the Nile, flowing quietly through the desert, like a ribbon of dark water beneath the blazing Egyptian sun. To the people of ancient Egypt, the Nile was more than a river. It was life itself. Every year, the floodwaters arrived with remarkable precision, transforming dry earth into fertile land capable of sustaining one of the greatest civilizations humanity would ever know. Villages became cities, cities became kingdoms, and eventually, those kingdoms united beneath a single ruler, the pharaoh. To modern eyes, the pharaoh was a king, but to the ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh was something far greater, a bridge between worlds, part human, part divine, a living presence through which cosmic order itself was maintained. The Egyptians called this balance ma'at, harmony, truth, order. Without it, the world would descend into chaos, and so every ritual, every temple, every monument, every prayer was part of preserving the delicate balance between the mortal world and the eternal one beyond it. At night, the people of Egypt looked upward toward the stars with deep reverence. The heavens were not empty. They were alive. The movement of constellations carried spiritual meaning. The sun itself was worshipped as a divine force crossing the sky each day before descending into the underworld every night. Even death was seen as part of a larger cosmic cycle, not feared, but prepared for. And nowhere was this preparation more visible than in the construction of the pyramids. At first, Egyptian tombs were simple, flat structures known as mastabas, built from mud brick beside the desert sands. But over generations, these structures evolved, growing larger, more ambitious, more eternal, until eventually, one man attempted something humanity had never seen before. His name was Djoser, and beside him stood a brilliant architect known as Imhotep, a man so respected that centuries later he would become something close to legend. Some called him a genius, others a magician. Under Imhotep's guidance, the first great pyramid began to rise from the desert at Saqqara, not smooth like the pyramids most people imagine today, but layered, a staircase of stone ascending toward the heavens, the step pyramid. And in many ways, this was the true beginning of humanity's obsession with pyramids, because once the idea existed, it refused to remain small. Each new pharaoh sought to surpass the last, to build larger, higher, closer to eternity itself. And over time, the pyramids transformed from tombs into impossible monuments, structures so enormous, so mathematically precise, that even thousands of years later, they continue to challenge explanation, especially the largest of them all, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Even now, standing beneath the stars of modern Egypt, the Great Pyramid remains deeply unsettling to witness in person, not because it is beautiful, but because it feels impossible, as though it should not exist, as though it belongs to another age entirely, and perhaps that feeling is where the mystery truly begins. The Great Pyramid was built for the pharaoh Khufu. At least, that is what historians believe. And according to mainstream history, its construction began roughly 4,500 years ago. To imagine that span of time is difficult. Entire empires have risen and vanished since then. Languages have disappeared. Religions have transformed. Civilizations have turned to dust. and still, the pyramid remains. Originally, the structure stood even taller than it does today. Its outer casing was once covered in smooth white limestone, polished so brightly beneath the Egyptian sun that some ancient accounts claimed it could be seen from enormous distances away. Imagine it for a moment, not weathered and broken as it appears now, but shining, brilliant beneath the desert sky, like a mountain carved from light, and inside, a labyrinth of narrow passages, hidden chambers, ascending corridors, and strange architectural decisions that continue to puzzle researchers even now. The scale alone is staggering. More than 2 million stone blocks, some weighing several tons, transported somehow across sand and desert terrain, then lifted into position with extraordinary precision. And this is where modern fascination truly takes hold. Because when people look at the Great Pyramid, many ask themselves the same question. How? How could an ancient civilization accomplish something so massive without modern machinery, without engines, without cranes, without steel tools? The accepted explanation is that enormous labor forces used ramps, sleds, ropes, wooden rollers, and remarkable organization. And perhaps that explanation is true, but for many people it feels incomplete, because the pyramid does not merely appear large, it appears precise. Its alignment with true north is astonishingly accurate. Some researchers claim the structure contains mathematical relationships connected to the Earth itself, the stars, even certain astronomical measurements. Whether intentional or coincidental remains debated, but mystery has a way of growing inside uncertainty. And over time, new theories began emerging from the shadows. Some believed ancient civilizations possessed lost technologies now forgotten. Others suggested the pyramids were not tombs at all, but energy structures, observatories, or repositories of hidden knowledge. And eventually, perhaps inevitably, another theory emerged, one that would become among the most famous conspiracy theories in modern history. The idea that humanity did not build the pyramids alone, that somewhere in humanity's distant past, something else intervened. Visitors, teachers, beings from beyond the earth itself, ancient astronauts. Today, the theory is often dismissed by historians and archaeologists, and yet it persists, not because evidence conclusively proves it, but because the pyramids inspire a strange emotional reaction in people, a feeling difficult to articulate, the sense that humanity once stood closer to something mysterious, something forgotten, something vast. And perhaps that is why theories surrounding the pyramids never truly disappear, because every generation looks at them and sees not only stone but possibility. For centuries, the desert guarded the secrets of the pyramids carefully. Wind erased footprints, sand buried ruins, entire histories vanished beneath silence. And as knowledge faded, imagination slowly moved into the empty spaces left behind. Ancient travelers who encountered the pyramids often struggled to believe human hands could have created them. Some attributed the structures to lost civilizations swallowed by time. Others imagined survivors from Atlantis, keepers of forgotten wisdom who carried advanced knowledge across the ancient world before vanishing forever beneath the sea. Even in the ancient world itself, stories began to blur the line between history and myth. Greek historians wrote about Egypt with fascination. Roman visitors stood before the pyramids in awe. And still, the structures refuse to fully explain themselves, because the pyramids are strangely resistant to certainty. They reveal enough to create theories, but never enough to end them. Over time, certain ideas began repeating across generations. The belief that ancient humanity possessed knowledge now lost, knowledge of astronomy, geometry, engineering, possibly even consciousness itself. Some pointed toward the extraordinary alignment of the pyramids with the stars, particularly Orion's belt. To the ancient Egyptians, Orion was associated with Osiris, god of death, rebirth, and the afterlife. And according to some speculative theories, the pyramids were designed not merely as tombs, but as cosmic instruments, structures intended to mirror the heavens themselves. Others looked beneath the pyramids instead of above them. Rumors spread of hidden chambers still undiscovered deep below the plateau. Secret archives, buried halls, ancient records concealed from history. Even today, modern scans occasionally reveal mysterious voids hidden inside the Great Pyramid. Empty spaces whose purpose remains uncertain. And whenever uncertainty appears, conspiracy follows quietly behind it. Because human beings are deeply uncomfortable with incomplete stories, we want answers, clear endings, definite explanations. But the pyramids deny us that comfort. They remain suspended somewhere between archaeology, myth, engineering, and dream. And perhaps that ambiguity is precisely why they continue to fascinate us thousands of years later. Not because we truly expect aliens beneath the sand, not because we fully believe forgotten civilizations still sleep below the pyramids, but because the structures awaken something ancient inside the human imagination. A longing for mystery, a suspicion that history may be far stranger than it appears in textbooks. And late at night, when the world grows quiet, it becomes easier to understand why these ideas endure. Because beneath the stars, with enough silence around us, the impossible begins to feel strangely possible. There is another reason the pyramids continue to disturb the imagination. Not simply because they are large, but because they appear intentional in ways that feel almost unsettling. The Great Pyramid is aligned with true north with astonishing accuracy. Even modern researchers continue debating exactly how ancient builders achieved such precision thousands of years ago, without compasses, without satellites, without modern instruments, only the sky above them. And perhaps that is the key, because the ancient Egyptians were not merely builders, they were observers, careful watchers of the heavens. Night after night, generation after generation, Egyptian priests studied the stars moving slowly across the darkness above the desert. The sky was sacred to them, not separate from human life, but connected to it. The stars represented gods, cycles, eternity, the passage between worlds. And according to some theories, the pyramids themselves were designed as reflections of the heavens above. One particular idea became especially famous: the Orion correlation theory. The theory suggests that the three pyramids of Giza mirror the position of the stars within Orion's belt. To the ancient Egyptians, Orion was deeply associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife. And so some believe the pyramids were positioned intentionally, not simply as monuments for the dead, but as gateways connecting Earth to the stars themselves. Whether this theory is true remains heavily debated. Many scholars reject it entirely, and yet something about the idea continues to captivate people. Because across nearly every ancient civilization, humanity looked upward with fascination. The stars were maps, stories, warnings, destinations, and perhaps, deep down, modern people still feel the same pull toward the night sky, especially in moments of silence, especially late at night, when the world grows darker and older questions begin quietly returning to the surface. Who are we? Why are we here? And what did ancient civilizations believe they understood about the universe that we may have forgotten? Perhaps the pyramids endure because they force us to confront those questions, not through words, but through stone. The deeper researchers explored the pyramids, the stranger the structures became, narrow shafts leading nowhere, hidden corridors, sealed chambers, passages constructed with purposes still uncertain even now. Over the years, rumours spread endlessly through books, documentaries, internet forums, whispered conversations after midnight, stories of hidden rooms still waiting beneath the stone, lost records hidden deep below the sands of Giza, ancient libraries concealed from history, and perhaps most fascinating of all, the possibility that parts of the pyramids remain undiscovered entirely. Even today, modern scanning technology occasionally reveals mysterious voids hidden within the structures, empty spaces, unexplained cavities inside the Great Pyramid itself, rooms whose purposes remain unknown. And while archaeologists approach such discoveries cautiously, the public imagination tends to move much faster. Because mystery creates momentum, and once people begin imagining hidden chambers beneath ancient monuments, their imagination rarely stops there. Some speculate about forgotten technologies, others imagine sacred initiation chambers used by priests long ago. Some believe ancient knowledge was intentionally hidden from future civilizations, and others drift further still into theories involving lost continents, visitors from distant stars, or civilizations far older than recorded history itself. Most of these ideas remain speculative. Many are almost certainly untrue, and yet, late at night, beneath the weight of silence, it becomes easier to understand why people continue imagining them. Because the pyramids do not feel ordinary, they feel layered, as though history itself settled over them repeatedly across thousands of years, covering older mysteries beneath newer explanations. Perhaps that feeling is only psychological, or perhaps human beings instinctively recognize when something ancient still holds unanswered questions. Questions buried carefully beneath stone and sand, waiting patiently as the centuries continue passing overhead. It is tempting to believe the true mystery of the pyramids lies in how they were built, but perhaps the greater mystery is why humanity cannot stop thinking about them. Civilizations across history have built enormous monuments, castles, temples, cathedrals, palaces, and yet few places on earth occupy the imagination quite like ancient Egypt. Perhaps it is because Egypt feels strangely untouched by time. Even in photographs, the desert appears suspended outside the modern world. The pyramids rise from the sand almost like memories from another age, an age closer to myth than history. And unlike many ancient civilizations, Egypt left behind enormous fragments of itself. Stone faces staring silently outward, hieroglyphs carved into walls, burial chambers filled with symbols still debated today. The civilization feels close enough to touch, yet impossibly distant at the same time, and perhaps that tension creates fascination, the sense that we are looking directly at humanity's distant past, while simultaneously realizing how much remains unknown. For thousands of years, travelers journeyed to Egypt searching for answers. Historians, mystics, archaeologists, conquerors, dreamers, some sought knowledge, others sought treasure, and some, maybe unknowingly, were searching for something emotional rather than historical. Perspective. Because standing before the pyramids has a strange effect on people. Human worries begin shrinking. Daily anxieties lose their urgency. The scale of history becomes impossible to ignore. Empires collapse. Generations disappear. Entire nations vanish. And still, the pyramids remain beneath the stars, watching silently, patiently, almost indifferent to time itself. Maybe that's why people continue returning to them generation after generation, not because the pyramids provide answers, but because they remind us how small we are beneath the vastness of time. And strangely, there can be comfort in that realization, especially at night, especially when the world feels heavy. The pyramids remind us that humanity has always lived beside mystery, and perhaps we always will. Some mysteries begin with thunder, some begin with a scream, some begin with a door opening in the dark, but this one began with a sound, a very small sound, a hollow note beneath stone. It was the kind of sound most men would have missed, a dull difference in the echo, a little emptiness hiding beneath the world. The man who heard it was named Elias Marlowe. At least, that is the name found in the only surviving fragments of his field journal. He was not famous, not at first. He was not one of those grand archaeologists whose portraits hang in museums, standing proudly beside statues, with their hats tilted against the sun, and history arranged neatly behind them. Elias was quieter than that, a scholar by training, a surveyor by necessity, a man who understood stone better than he understood people. He had spent years studying ancient construction methods, ramps, ropes, quarries, sledges, labor camps, the practical machinery of human effort. He was not a mystic. He did not believe in ancient astronauts. He did not believe the pyramids were power plants. He did not believe in Atlantis. In fact, he found most pyramid conspiracies irritating, too dramatic, too careless, too willing to replace human genius with fantasy. To Elias, the true miracle of Egypt was not that it required aliens, it was that it did not. Human beings had built these monuments. That belief mattered to him. He had written it in lectures, defended it in conferences, said it gently but firmly to anyone who tried to turn ancient Egypt into a playground for speculation. And perhaps that is what made what happened to him so strange, because Elias Marlowe did not go to Giza looking for a secret. He went there to disprove one. It was late November when he arrived on the plateau. The desert had cooled. The violent heat of summer had withdrawn into the stone, leaving behind pale mornings, soft wind, and evenings that seemed to darken all at once. At that time, Elias was attached to a small research team conducting acoustic surveys near the base of the Great Pyramid. Nothing dramatic, nothing intended for television. The work was slow and repetitive. They used ground-penetrating instruments, small vibration tests, old maps, new scans, and decades of accumulated measurements. Most days produced very little: stone, sand, fractures, old tunnels, known passages. Nothing more. But Elias liked that kind of work, the slow patience of it, the way the desert demanded humility. He would arrive before sunrise, when the pyramids were still dark silhouettes against the paling sky. Then he would stand there for a few minutes before beginning, just watching, not praying exactly, but quiet. The others teased him for it. One of the junior technicians, a young woman named Farah, once asked him what he was waiting for. Elias smiled and said, "I'm waiting for the stone to wake up." Farah laughed. But later she would remember that sentence, and she would wonder whether, in some impossible way, the stone had answered. The first anomaly appeared on a Tuesday, a minor irregularity beneath the eastern side of the plateau. The instruments registered a difference in density, not enough to declare a chamber, not enough to excite anyone, but enough to make Elias pause. He ran the scan again. Then again. The result remained: a narrow region beneath the bedrock, deeper than expected, with an acoustic profile that did not match the surrounding stone. Farah looked at the numbers and shrugged. A fissure, maybe. Elias nodded. A fissure. That was the reasonable answer. And Elias liked reasonable answers. Still, he marked the location in his notebook, not with an exclamation mark, not with excitement, only with a small circle, and beside it he wrote, "Hollow response." Over the next week, the same hollow response appeared 3 more times, not always in the same place, not exactly, but near enough to suggest a pattern, a line, a buried corridor perhaps, or an ancient drainage cavity, or a natural crack beneath the limestone. The senior director of the project, Dr. Halim, was not interested. He was a careful man, political in the way all senior archaeologists working in Egypt had to be political. He had survived long enough in academia to know that discoveries could ruin careers as easily as they could make them, especially discoveries beneath Giza. Giza was not merely an archaeological site. It was a battlefield of theories. Every stone had been claimed by someone. Historians, engineers, mystics, nationalists, tourists, conspiracy writers, documentary producers, men with funding, men with obsessions. Dr. Halim had no desire to feed another frenzy. When Elias showed him the scans, Halim adjusted his glasses and said, "Probably nothing." Elias agreed. Probably. Then he asked for permission to run one more survey before the team moved on. Halim sighed. Fine. One more, but quietly. No reports yet, no speculation. Elias understood. At Giza, even a rumor could become a monster. The next survey was conducted at dusk. That had not been the plan. A delayed permit, a broken sensor, a missing cable, the small annoyances that fill every excavation. By the time the equipment was ready, the sun had begun sinking behind the desert. Most of the tourists had gone. The air had cooled. The pyramid stood above them in a kind of enormous silence. Farah held the light while Elias positioned the sensor against an exposed section of ancient stone near the base. He tapped the surface with a calibrated striker. Once. A dense sound returned. He moved the instrument slightly, tapped again. Stone. Again. Stone. Again. Then, a different sound. Soft. Low. Hollow. Farah looked up. Elias froze. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The sound faded quickly, but it seemed to leave a space behind it, as if something beneath the stone had briefly opened its eye. Elias tapped again. The same hollow note returned. Farah whispered, "That's not a fissure." Elias did not answer. He checked the reading, then he checked it again. The sensor showed a cavity beneath them. Not large, but shaped. That was the problem. Natural cavities are irregular, broken, chaotic, organic. This one appeared linear, its edges too clean, its depth too consistent, and at its far end, beneath several meters of stone, there seemed to be a chamber, small, sealed, waiting. Elias should have reported it immediately. That was protocol. Instead, he copied the data by hand into his notebook. Then he saved the digital scan twice. Once to the official project drive. Once to a private storage device he kept in the inside pocket of his field vest. He told himself this was caution, redundancy, professional discipline. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had felt something change, a quiet instinct that comes before fear. The awareness that a line has been crossed, even before the mind understands what line it was. That night, he could not sleep. The hotel room was small and overheated. Traffic hummed faintly beyond the window. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once, then went silent. Elias sat at the desk beneath a yellow lamp, reviewing the scan again and again. A narrow passage, a chamber, a sealed space beneath stone older than most nations. He enlarged the image, adjusted the contrast, measured the angle. Then he noticed something that made him lean closer. The passage was not random. It pointed toward the pyramid. Not directly to the center, not to the known chambers, but toward a region below the Queen's chamber shafts, an area long associated with strange architectural questions. Elias stared at the screen, and for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to wonder, not believe, not conclude, only wonder. What if something had been missed? The next morning, the official data was gone. Not corrupted, not mislabeled. Gone. The folder existed. The files did not. At first, Elias assumed a technical error. Then Farah checked the backup server. Nothing. The local drive. Nothing. The daily transfer log. Altered. She looked at Elias. He felt suddenly cold. "Did you delete anything?" he asked. Farah shook her head. Her face had gone pale beneath the morning light. Elias lowered his voice. "Do not mention this to anyone yet." But someone already knew, because that afternoon Dr. Halim called Elias into his office. The room smelled faintly of paper, dust, and bitter coffee. Halim was seated behind his desk, hands folded, expression unreadable. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he asked, "What exactly did you find last night?" Elias felt his heartbeat slow, not speed up, slow, as though his body had understood the danger before his mind did. He answered carefully, "An acoustic anomaly." Halim watched him. "Only that? A possible cavity?" "Possible? Yes." Halim leaned back. "You must be very careful with possible things at Giza." "I know." "No, Elias, I do not think you do." The older man stood and walked to the window. Outside, the desert was bright and ordinary. Tour buses moved slowly in the distance. Vendors called to visitors. Camels shifted lazily beneath the sun. The world appeared exactly as it had the day before. But inside that office, something invisible had tightened. Halim spoke without turning around. "There are discoveries here that do not belong to the discoverer." Elias said nothing. "There are discoveries that belong to ministries, to institutions, to governments, to the dead, to the living, to narratives people have spent lifetimes protecting." He turned. "And sometimes there are discoveries that should remain buried until the world is ready to misunderstand them." Elias studied him. "You know about the chamber." Halim's face changed very slightly. Not surprise, recognition. "That was worse." Elias stepped closer. "You knew it was there." Halim looked suddenly tired. "I know there are many things beneath Giza. That is not the same. What is beneath that stone?" Halim's voice became quiet. "Go home, Elias." The warning should have been enough. For a different man, perhaps it would have been. But Elias was not reckless. That was what made the danger worse. Reckless men can be dismissed. Obsessive men can be mocked. But careful men, when they become afraid, begin keeping records. That evening, Elias made 3 copies of his private scan. He encrypted one, printed another, and hid the third inside the lining of an old book he had brought with him from London. The book was a translation of ancient Egyptian funerary texts. He placed the memory card between 2 pages describing the passage of the soul through the night. Then he sat very still for a long time. Outside, Cairo murmured in the distance. Inside, the little room seemed to hold its breath. At 1:13 in the morning, someone knocked on his door. 3 knocks. Soft, even. Elias did not move. The knocking came again. Then a voice. Dr. Marlowe? British? Male. Controlled. Elias walked quietly to the door, but did not open it. Who is it? A pause. Someone who would prefer this not become unpleasant? Elias felt his mouth go dry. The man continued. You have material that does not belong to you. Elias said nothing. We are not here to threaten you. That was when he understood he was already being threatened. He moved backward from the door. Slowly. The old hotel room had a narrow balcony overlooking an alley. He crossed to it, opened the door as silently as he could, and stepped out into the cool night air. The knock at the door came a third time. Harder now. Elias climbed over the low balcony wall onto a maintenance ledge. For a moment he almost laughed. The absurdity of it. Middle-aged archaeologist in desert boots. Escaping across a hotel balcony because of an acoustic scan. Then the door to his room opened behind him. Not forced. Opened. As if the person outside had always had the key. Elias stopped laughing. He made it down through the service stairwell and into the alley behind the hotel. He carried only his notebook, his passport, and the old book with the hidden memory card. No luggage, no laptop, no phone. The city at night seemed both enormous and strangely indifferent. Cars passed, men smoked outside cafes. A television played somewhere behind a half-closed shutter. Life continued. That was the strange thing about fear. It did not stop the world. It only separated you from it. Elias walked until sunrise. By morning he was at Farah's apartment. She opened the door before he knocked twice. You too? He asked. She nodded. They came to my brother's house. Elias closed his eyes. For a moment guilt moved through him so sharply he nearly sat down. Farah noticed. Do not do that, she said. You did not create whatever this is. No, but I found it. She looked at the book in his hand. Do you still have the scan? Elias nodded. Then we find out what they are hiding. Farah knew someone. Every archaeologist in Egypt knows someone. A cousin, a former professor, a retired inspector, a guard who has seen too much, a man who drinks tea near the archives and remembers where old papers go. This man was called Nabil. He was nearly 80, thin as a reed, with bright eyes and hands stained by tobacco. He had spent 40 years cataloguing excavation records no one ever read. When Farah showed him the scan, he did not look surprised. He only looked sad. I wondered when it would speak again, he said. Elias leaned forward. Again. Nabil lit a cigarette, though Farah immediately told him not to smoke inside. He ignored her. In 1938, he said, a French surveyor heard something in that same region. No proper instruments then, only hammer tests, old methods. He wrote of a hollow beneath the eastern limestone. What happened? The report disappeared. And the surveyor? Nabil exhaled smoke slowly. Returned to France. Stopped publishing. Died young. Elias glanced at Farah. Nabil continued. In 1974, a German team detected density irregularities nearby. Their permit was not renewed. In 1999, a private scan found something similar. The equipment was confiscated for procedural violations. He tapped ash into a small dish. Giza is full of ghosts, Dr. Marlowe. Not all of them ancient. Nabil retrieved a folder from a locked cabinet in the back room. Inside were photocopies, old sketches, correspondence, fragments of reports, a hand-drawn map of the plateau with several areas marked in red pencil. One mark matched Elias's anomaly almost exactly. Beside it, in French, someone had written, Salle sans nom, the room without a name. Elias whispered the phrase aloud, the room without a name. Nabil nodded. There were rumours among older inspectors. A sealed space, not a tomb, not a shaft, something else. What is it? Nabil hesitated. It's a record chamber. Farah laughed once, but without humour. Like the Hall of Records? Nabil looked at her sharply. Do not say that phrase too loudly. The Hall of Records was one of the most persistent legends surrounding Egypt. A hidden archive said to contain the lost knowledge of an earlier civilization. Some associated it with Atlantis, some with ancient priesthoods, some with prophecies from mystics and sleeping seers. Most scholars dismissed it entirely. Elias had dismissed it many times himself. But now, inside Nabil's small apartment, with the photocopied map open before him, the phrase no longer felt ridiculous. It felt dangerous. He looked at Nabil. Do you believe it exists? The old man smiled faintly. I believe men are very eager to hide things that do not exist. For 2 days, Elias and Farah stayed hidden. They worked through Nabil's papers, compared maps, checked old survey notes, reconstructed permit timelines, matched unexplained closures around the plateau with reports of irregular findings. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Not proof, something more unsettling. Absence arranged too carefully to be accidental. Missing files, withdrawn permissions, researchers redirected, data sealed, names removed from indexes, and always near the eastern side of the Great Pyramid, the same suggestion appeared. A passage, a chamber, a silence in the stone. On the third night, Nabil told them about the Order of the Horizon. Elias almost smiled at the name. It sounded invented, melodramatic, the sort of thing a novelist would create. But Nabil did not smile. Not an order like monks, he said. Not robes, not candles. Do not imagine theatre. Then what? An agreement? Between whom? Nabil shrugged. Men who believed certain knowledge would cause more harm than good. Officials, collectors, academics, intelligence people perhaps, old families with older money. No one knows exactly. Farah frowned. That sounds impossible to maintain. Nabil looked at her. Not if the knowledge is vague enough. Not if no one knows the whole thing. Not if every person believes they are protecting civilization from chaos. Elias sat back. Protecting civilization from what? Nabil pointed toward the map. From the possibility that history is not what we say it is. That night, Elias dreamed of the chamber. He stood inside a narrow passage beneath the pyramid. The air was dry and perfectly still. Ahead of him was a stone door without handles. On it was carved a single eye. Not the eye of Horus. Something older, simpler, a circle, a line. A pupil made of darkness. Behind the door something was breathing. Not an animal, not a person. A slow movement of air, as if the earth itself were asleep on the other side. Elias placed his hand on the stone. It was warm. Then a voice behind him whispered, Some doors are not sealed to keep men out. They are sealed to keep time in. He woke before dawn. The room was grey. Farah was asleep in a chair, her arms folded, her face drawn with exhaustion. Nabil was awake, watching him. You dreamed of it, the old man said. Elias did not answer. Nabil nodded as if this confirmed something he already knew. Then we have less time. The chance came unexpectedly. A maintenance closure on the eastern side of the plateau, one night only. A section of fencing moved, a guard replaced by another guard who owed Nabil an old favour. A service route left briefly unmonitored between 2:40 and 3:10 in the morning. 30 minutes. That was all. Not enough to excavate. Not enough to open anything properly, but perhaps enough to confirm the passage. Elias knew it was madness. He also knew he would go. Because by then, the question had already passed beyond career, beyond caution, beyond reputation. Some mysteries become a form of gravity. You can resist them for a while, but eventually they begin pulling everything toward themselves. At 2:35 in the morning, Elias, Farah, and Nabil approached the plateau beneath a moonless sky. The pyramid loomed above them. Not lit for tourists now, not photographed, not explained. Only a vast black geometry against the stars. For the first time, Elias understood why ancient people might have believed stone could be alive. The pyramid did not look built. It looked present, as though it had emerged from the earth fully formed, carrying its silence with it. They moved quickly, no talking, only the crunch of sand beneath their shoes, and the faint wind slipping across the limestone. At the marked location, Farah unpacked the compact scanner. Elias positioned the sensor. Nabil stood behind them, watching the darkness. The first reading failed. The second returned interference. The third revealed the void. Clearer than before, a passage beneath them. A descending line of empty space, and at the end of it, a chamber. Farah covered her mouth. Elias felt something inside him go very still. There it was, not a theory, not a rumour, not a story. A room, sealed beneath the pyramid, waiting in darkness for thousands of years. They should have left then. They had proof, enough to release, enough to force attention, enough to make denial difficult. But the scan revealed something else, a weak point, a narrow service fissure or ancient access cut, partially collapsed, but connected to the passage at an angle. Nabil stared at it. "I did not know that was there," he whispered. Elias looked at Farah. "No," she said immediately. "We cannot." But her voice lacked conviction. The fissure was barely wide enough for a person. Dangerous, unstable, illegal, insane. And yet, 10 minutes later, Elias was lowering himself into the dark with a headlamp strapped across his brow. The air changed immediately. Above ground, the desert wind moved freely. Below, the air was old, dry, mineral, still in a way that felt almost unnatural. He descended slowly through a sloping crack in the limestone. Farah followed behind him. Nabil remained above. "Too old for the passage," he said. But Elias suspected the real reason was different. Nabil had spent his life near the mystery. Perhaps he did not want to see it destroyed by becoming real. The descent took longer than expected. Stone scraped Elias's shoulder. Dust entered his mouth. The beam of his headlamp shook across walls never meant to be touched. Then the fissure opened. He dropped carefully onto a flat surface. Not natural stone, cut stone, a passage. Elias stood very slowly. Farah emerged behind him, breathing hard. For a moment, neither spoke. The passage extended ahead into darkness. Its walls were smooth, too smooth. No hieroglyphs and no decoration, no names of kings, no gods painted in profile, no offering scenes, no stars across the ceiling. Only stone, plain, severe, ancient beyond ornament. Elias whispered, "This is not a tomb." Farah's voice was barely audible. "Then what is it?" From somewhere deeper inside the passage, a current of air moved past them, cold, brief, almost like a sigh. They walked for perhaps 20 meters, no more. But in that enclosed silence, distance became difficult to judge. Every step sounded too loud. Every breath felt borrowed. At the end of the passage stood a stone door, just as Elias had seen in his dream. No handle, no inscription, only a carved symbol at eye level, a circle, a line, a dark central mark. Farah lifted the light. "That is not dynastic Egyptian," she whispered. Elias said nothing. His throat had tightened. He reached into his pocket and removed a small camera. His hand shook as he took photographs. One, then another, then another. Farah scanned the stone with a handheld sensor. "There is a space beyond it," she said. "How large?" "I do not know." She adjusted the reading. "Maybe not large, but..." She stopped. "What?" "There is something inside." "A box? A statue? Debris?" Farah swallowed. "No, a signal." Elias turned. "A signal?" The device flickered in her hand. Not electronic, not modern. A resonance. Something responding to the scan. From the other side of the door came a sound. Very faint, almost too low to hear. A vibration. A hum. Elias stepped closer. The stone door trembled beneath his fingertips. Warm. Just like in the dream. Then the carved symbol seemed to darken. Not move. Not glow. Nothing so theatrical. Only deepen somehow. As though the shadow inside it had become more complete. Farah whispered his name. Elias did not answer, because suddenly, in that narrow passage beneath the pyramid, he understood something that frightened him more than any secret organization ever could. Whatever was behind that door was not treasure, not gold, not scrolls, not royal remains. It was knowledge. But not knowledge in the way modern people use the word. Not facts, not data, not a missing chapter of history. Something older. A record, perhaps, a memory, a preserved message from minds that had understood the world differently, and perhaps too well. Then the radio on Farah's belt crackled. A voice came through. "Nabil, they are here." Farah grabbed Elias's arm. "We have to go." The hum behind the door deepened. For a moment, Elias felt a wild desire to stay, to open it, to know, to cross the final distance between speculation and truth. But then he thought of all the men before him, the French surveyor, the German team, the missing reports, the altered logs, the erased files, and he wondered whether every one of them had felt exactly this. The doorway, the pressure, the almost unbearable pull of the hidden thing. Perhaps that was the true protection around the chamber. Not guards, not ministries, not secret orders. Human longing itself, the need to know, even when knowing might ruin everything. Elias took one final photograph. Then he ran. They escaped through the fissure minutes before the guards reached the site. Nabil was gone. At first, Elias thought he had abandoned them. Then, near the service road, Farah found his walking stick lying in the sand. Beside it was a cigarette still burning. No sign of struggle, no footprints clear enough to follow. Only the stick, and the slow wind moving sand across it. Farah wanted to search. Elias knew they could not. That decision would haunt him for the rest of his life. By dawn, they were in a taxi heading away from Cairo. By noon, the photographs were uploaded to 3 separate accounts. By evening, 2 of those accounts had been deleted. The third remained accessible for 12 minutes longer, long enough for Elias to send the images to 7 people: journalists, researchers, 1 former colleague at Oxford, 1 independent filmmaker, 1 editor at a magazine that specialized in ancient history. Only 2 replied. The first wrote, "Is this real?" The second wrote, "Do not contact me again." 3 days later, the official statement was released. There had been no chamber, no passage, no unauthorized access, no credible discovery. The images circulating online were declared fabricated, a hoax, a digital manipulation, an irresponsible attempt to exploit public fascination with Egypt. Dr. Elias Marlowe, formerly respected but increasingly unstable, was accused of violating excavation ethics, fabricating data, and endangering protected heritage. Farah disappeared from public record for several months. Nabil was never mentioned at all. The story collapsed almost instantly, not because people did not believe it, but because too many people believed too many versions of it. Some claimed Elias had found alien technology. Others said Atlantean tablets. Others said a pre-human archive. A power generator, a tomb of Osiris, a map of the stars, a warning, a weapon. Within days, the truth had drowned beneath imagination. And perhaps that was exactly what someone wanted. Because the easiest way to hide a real secret is not always silence. Sometimes it is noise, endless noise. So many theories, so many arguments, so many exaggerated claims, that the original discovery becomes impossible to see clearly. A small hollow note beneath stone, lost beneath the roar of the world. Years later, a final letter attributed to Elias Marlowe appeared in a private collection in Prague. No one knows whether it is genuine. The handwriting appears similar. The paper is old enough. The ink has been dated to the correct period. But certainty, as always, remains out of reach. The letter is brief, only 1 page. It reads, "I no longer believe the question is who built the pyramids. That question is too small. Men built them. Of this I am still convinced. But I believe they were building around something, protecting something, marking something, perhaps something they inherited rather than invented. The chamber beneath the eastern stone is real. I saw the door, I touched it, I heard what was behind it. And I now understand why some men would prefer history remain incomplete. There is mercy in ignorance, but there is also a terrible loneliness. To stand before a door built thousands of years ago and know that someone on the other side expected us." The letter ends there. No signature, only initials. E.M. Stories like this rarely end cleanly. They dissolve into sand, into rumour, into the quiet places where history becomes difficult to separate from dream. Perhaps Elias Marlowe found nothing more than a natural fracture beneath the stone. A hollow space, a strange echo, a mistake made larger by fear. Perhaps there was no hidden passage, no sealed chamber, no room without a name, only limestone, darkness, and the human mind searching for meaning in an ancient silence. But maybe, somewhere beneath the eastern side of the Great Pyramid, there really is a door no one has opened. A door without a handle. A door marked by a symbol older than the dynasties. A door built not for kings, not for treasure, not for tourists, but for time itself. Whatever waits behind it, if anything waits behind it, has already waited thousands of years. It does not need to hurry. The desert never hurries. The stars do not hurry. Stone has no need for urgency. Above the chamber the pyramid remains, layer upon layer, block upon block, shadow upon shadow. The known passages sit quietly inside it. The king's chamber, the queen's chamber, the grand gallery, the narrow shafts pointing into darkness. Names given by people who arrived long after the builders had gone. Names placed gently over mysteries that may have had other names once. Older names, forgotten names. Perhaps Elias understood this in the end. Perhaps that is why he stopped trying to prove what he had seen. Because proof belongs to daylight, to offices, to papers, to signatures, to arguments between men who need the world to remain stable. But mystery belongs to night, to the half-lit room, to the soft sound of rain, to the moment before sleep, when the mind loosens, and the impossible no longer feels quite so far away. The chamber beneath the stone may be real, it may be myth. It may be only a story passed quietly from one tired mind to another. But the pyramid remains either way. Far away in Egypt, beneath a sky full of ancient stars, it stands in silence. The wind moves across the plateau. Sand gathers in small waves against the stone. The last footsteps of the day disappear. The voices of guides and tourists fade. The desert cools. The moonlight touches the old limestone. Somewhere below, in darkness, no one has entered for thousands of years. There may be a passage. There may be a door. There may be nothing at all. And that is all right. Not every mystery has to open for us. Not every sealed room has to surrender its secret. Some things can remain buried. Some questions can rest beneath stone. Some stories are meant to be carried only so far, then left quietly at the edge of sleep. So let the pyramids keep their silence tonight. Let the desert keep its memory. Let Elias Marlowe become what all seekers eventually become. A whisper inside the archive. A name written lightly in dust. A man who may have found something impossible, or may simply have listened too closely to the hollow places beneath the world. Either way, his story drifts back into darkness. The room beneath the stone remains closed. The symbol on the door remains unseen. The air behind it remains still. And above it all, the Great Pyramid waits beneath the stars. Silent, ancient, patient, as it always has, as it may always be. If you are still awake, you can leave a quiet note below, where in the world you are listening from, what time it is there, and which mystery you would like the archive to open next, but only if you feel like it. For tonight, there is nothing more required. Only the rain, only the dark, only the slow breathing of the world around you. Sleep well, and may the unknown remain gentle with you.